Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today from Washington, D.C. is Thomas Gorguissian, a journalist, analyst, originally from Egypt, who writes for not just Egyptian publications, but also other Middle Eastern and international publications. Thomas, thank you for joining us again on CivilNet.
Thank you.
Thomas, help us understand what's going on in Egypt, specifically in the context of the convictions of the Al-Jazeera journalists who have been detained for so many months. And there was hope that the international pressure would move the Egyptian new authorities to do something decent, I would say, correct. But instead they chose to convict these guys. What's happening?
What's happening is generally what's happening in Egypt. It's good that you coined that expression at the beginning of your question. Say we are trying to understand. I mean, almost everybody is trying to understand what's going on, including Egyptians. Okay, it's a long time now, almost 3 years now. Egyptians are trying to shape what they want to shape in the way that they want to shape. Let's put it in a different way. So what happened recently? It's really was kind of a bad thing. Just not because it was journalism, freedom of expression, because it was like, I think it was more an issue of how Egypt looks now in the international world. I mean, or the world in general. It's because, you know, it's like I'm looking to it, and as some people may look to it as a freedom of expression issue, but the whole issue was again, it's a political issue. It's between Egypt and Qatar in particular, or Egypt and Al-Jazeera specifically. Because as you know, and as most of the people who are following the news know, that Al-Jazeera in particular, the Arabic version, took a side with the Muslim Brotherhood, and not just a side, it's like waging a war against Egypt now on the program and programming and asking and questioning and criticizing and magnifying the whole things going on in Egypt.
So the journalists were the scapegoats. The journalists were the
scapegoat, but it was a bad decision, as I told you. It's a bad choice. I mean, as you know, as all of us know, it's too bad to fight the journalists, you know, even if they are wrong. Even PR people, when they advise politicians, they said, okay, be nice with the journalists. This is like a general rule. Whether it's right or wrong, that's another thing, even if he is a nasty or he is a politically motivated or anything. So what happened, but in the same time, of course, it's an alarming. Why? Because it's going to be just Al Jazeera or other people. In general, there is nothing going on for most of the people. I mean, like New York Times, an example, David Kirkpatrick, and the stories that he is writing, mostly critical of what's going on in Egypt, but nobody asked David Kirkpatrick to leave the country, or let's say being on trial or anything like that, or others. Hundreds, or let's say hundreds probably, of journalists are working there, foreign journalists. But of course, something like this, it's not a good for the atmosphere of working, because now anybody can tell anybody, okay, if you are not going to behave, you are going to be in trouble, like Al Jazeera people.
And the problem apparently isn't just with the internationals. The Egyptian writers, opinion makers, analysts themselves are being forced to make some very sharp decisions. Ala al-Aswani, the essayist, whose work is available in English broadly, has been tolerating, and now he said today, I think, he's out, huh?
Yeah. Ala and others are definitely, I will put it in a bigger picture, definitely I agree with you. It's like the atmosphere is really, as we say, it is not just, it's a matter of against something or for something. It's very polarized. And this polarization led Egyptians to be like, either you are with me or against me. As a matter of fact, if like, I'm going to tell you something which is shocking too. I mean, if you ask like a lot of people now in the streets or wherever you want, and big circles of people, I mean, it's not just few people, and it's not just government people. If it's okay that Allah is not writing, people will say, yes, it's good that he is not writing. It's good that he shut up, for example. It's too bad, but this is what they call it. Even sometimes, as a matter of fact, there is no a real official decisions made to say, okay, this is not going to happen. But as a matter of fact, what's going on, which is something I will use it, a term which is, I will try to translate to English so it can be understood. It's called what is the public consensus, if you can say it, which is like something which is like a nationalistic approach, maybe. So how it comes that Americans or Europeans or others, they want to say to do what we are going to do. Egyptians are saying this. And accordingly, they act, which is like sending a lot of messages, which is sometimes good or bad. A lot of, let's say, social media is playing a great role in bashing people and criticizing people and asking people to shut up.
But how does this happen? How does it happen that the noise, the public consensus that you said, was for so long progressive, change demanding, tolerant it seemed, democratic, desiring democracy it seemed, and now the public consensus is the opposite? How does this happen? What happened to this public?
It's not the opposite. It's not the opposite. It's that when they came to the choice, that somehow they become not completely convinced, but it's this choice between stability and I mean the democracy of, or let's say freedom of expression, or what they call it, between brotherhood and nationalistic approach, or let's say the military. And this become like in the last year, things become more polarized. That's why, I mean, it's not against that people are, they don't thinking. If you, I had discussions with people, and it's very interesting that it's like even sometimes they don't want to discuss it, or at least become so polarized to the extent that it's like, you know, it's like nationalistic. I'm sure that in Armenia you can figure out that way to, sometimes it's like very, if you are discussing an issue related to Turkey, for example, it's like clear. You don't discuss issues about Turkey. We are against them, that's it. This is the type of the issues that become people for them to discuss when it's related to brotherhood. It's not a matter just even like the idea of this political participation as the Western world are talking about it, or inclusiveness. I mean, most of the Egyptians, or the majority of the Egyptians, they're not talking about, they are talking about, okay, participation and all these things, but brotherhood for them is like, it's not a matter of Christian and Muslim issue. It's a matter of political Islam issue, and become really for them, it's an issue of like either we are going to lose the identity issue, the Egyptian identity as they call it, or the Egyptians call it, or we are going to be lost about be like others, Muslim or Islamic societies, whatever.
Okay, so now I have two questions, and you answer whichever one you want. One of them is, it's one thing when Armenians, a small nation, dispersed all around the world, we're concerned with nationalism, nationality, identity, being diluted, being lost. But Egyptians, seriously? That's the political issue we're trying to solve? That's question one. The other question, and maybe that you find them connected, is that why does this happen, that a political movement that stands for something suddenly is co-opted in a way that the only thing it stands for is against something?
Okay, I will try to mix the two questions in one answer, or at least to try to answer both of them. So I think, first of all, the identity issue, it's not a matter of you are big or small. It's a matter of, it's like whatever you define yourself as. You know, it's like the whole issue from brotherhood time was the real issue, which is it a part of the Islamist world, or Ummah Islamiyah, or it's a part of the real Egypt that people, they call it real Egypt, by the way, and which is including everything. It was really an identity issue. It's not an identity like, it's like, you know, when you say identity, we are talking about psychology, you say it's an identity issue. I'm not talking about that. When you are really rich, sometimes you have an identity richness, you have an identity problem. If you find that somebody of your family members are taking just part of it and not all of it, okay? Which is like, this is the identity issue. It's not a matter of a small or big. The second thing is about when people are, all these issues that they were raising, definitely it's still people, most of the people, I cannot say how many, but most of the people are in search of answers now for the question. When you say, is going back? No, they are not going back. They are lost again. but they are not, never, it's not going to be like it's now, we are in, let's say if we are now June 2014, it's not December 2010, definitely. It's not the same as March 2011 when everything was looking perfect. It's like a utopia after the fall of Mubarak. It's not the same, but because people realize that it's not just a matter that you have to dream, you have to figure out a way to realize your dreams. And unfortunately, over 30 years, 40 years, or whatever you can call it, people were like excited about to be free, but they don't know how to use freedom. I mean, I'm not saying that they don't know how to use it, that it's like trying to say, oh, they are now not capable enough to do it. But it's as a matter of fact, like when they say, when everybody start to talk, and then when they disagree with Allah, they said, oh, it's better that Allah is not talking. He doesn't have to talk with us, I mean, for example. And in the same time, something very different happened in the structure of the challenges that they are facing, that they realize that they have to build the country from the beginning, which is something really unusual. It looks unusual when you have 6 million government employees over years, but it's the reality that the 6 million government over years, they were like relying on, it was a structural dictatorship or whatever, so it was not, they are not creative enough to make anything change.
Regarding first the arrest and now the conviction of the Al-Jazeera journalists,
okay.
Is this a case like where Erdogan shut Twitter down, not because he thought nobody was going to get the news any other way, but because he wanted to show he could? He wanted to show his constituency he could. Is this a case of the Egyptian military demonstrating to the Egyptian people and the rest of the world that, look, we really are in charge? Or is it specifically to send a message to Al Jazeera and to the rest of the journalists?
No, I can tell you, I mean, take away the word, the rest of the journalists, yes, it's possible. I think it's both of them. I think, to be frank with you, it's both of them. So we can, I mean, the whole idea was that we can do it even if Secretary of State Kerry asked us not to do it a day before the trial. Part of it is that it can be explained like that. In the same time, or it's not a matter of we don't care, or we don't mind to make all our national, we use the word national because it's used in the message, you know, our national message or decision. In the same time, this is not just about politics. This is not about journalists, sorry. It's not about freedom of expression. It's about politics. And Qatar and others, they have to behave accordingly, you know. Maybe
this is a perfect place to end. The lesson in what you're saying is this process of democratization, you know, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, or 2 forward, 1 back, is really the same thing that the post-Soviet countries went through. Perhaps not as violently because the militaries are not so strong, but it's the same process that the Middle East is going through, specifically Egypt in this case.
And there is another factor which is, you have to add it, which is that in all these Middle Eastern countries, especially in Egypt and other, now you can see in Iraq, you can see in Syria and other places, there is this kind of, what we call it, the trend of Islamism, which is the struggle is not just the struggle of that how you can stand on your feet, that you are not going to go to 14 or 10 centuries back.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Thomas Gorguissian, originally from Egypt, journalist, commentator on international media, Middle Eastern media. Thank you for helping us, like you said, trying to understand Egypt, especially in light of the recent convictions. And thank you for following us on CivilNet.